even what passion does to investment. So he got into this pretty early when everybody thought that, wow, that's nuts. But down the road, you start like seeing it differently. So this is what passion brings to investment.
Cool. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أهلا وسهلا بكم أعزائي المشاهدين في بث اليوم الخامس من الفعاليات المصاحبة لهوماثون، الحدث الأكبر من نوعه في المنطقة. أكثر من 10,000 مطور عربي ينضمون اليوم لإيجاد حلول للحد من تأثير فيروس كورونا. انضموا لنا من 50 دولة حول العالم. ومع هذه الأجواء الرائعة والرمضانية نتمنى لكم أنكم كل عام وأنتم بخير، وأنكم مع أحبابكم آنسين بإذن الله. نتابع مع جلساتنا اليومية. جلستنا اليوم راح تكون باللغة الإنجليزية، بس راح نرفع لكم بإذن الله ترجمة كاملة بعد ما ينتهي البث. أنا أعتذر منكم أننا بنتحول للغة الإنجليزية الآن. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to welcome you to our next panel, the role of VCs, where we will be hosting His Royal Highness Prince Khalid bin Walid, founder and CEO of KBW Ventures, Ms. Courtney Powell, COO at 500 Startups, Mr. Abdurrahman Tarabzouni, the CEO at STV, and Ms. Jessica Wong, partner at EWTP Capital. This panel will be moderated and managed by Mr. Nabil Noor Burhanu, founder and managing partner at Graphene Ventures. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yasser, and Ramadan Mubarak for everyone who basically acknowledges fasting Ramadan, and thanks for the participants coming in from different places in the world, and for your time. I know it's late for some of you, maybe it's Courtney and I, almost midday. So I would start with COVID-19, pandemic that was not expected, and it came as a shock, almost first timer for everybody, I guess. We've probably read about some of the pandemics in history, and maybe we only started reading about it after the COVID-19. I would start with actually the impact on your investments and what has changed ever since this COVID-19 came. And we'll probably start with His Royal Highness, Prince Khalid.
We can start with Courtney and Jessica first. Ladies first.
Well, good gesture. You caught me on that.
Thank you. Thank you, and Ramadan Kareem to everyone. Certainly, COVID has been quite I think, a shock to everyone. I think a lot of the changes we're seeing across our portfolio in MENA and also throughout the world is really having to work very tactically with founders at this time to see what needs to be done to make sure that founders can withstand the economic uncertainty that they're facing right now. Certainly if they're raising capital, but also just in operations. So for us, it's looked like really getting involved in the day-to-day with our portfolio companies and helping them to put a plan in place, just like I'm sure all of us have been doing.
Jessica?
Yes, and so the crisis already happened for more than 3 or even 4 months for all of us. Just like Connie said, definitely all of our portfolios are kind of taking a hit from this challenge, and we are working very closely with all our portfolio founders, with all their leadership, to see how we can support them. Because we are investment platform which support kind of startups from seed stage to growth stage. So in the last couple months, we have already seen some very challenging things that happen. One of our portfolio, because it's a very early stage, and the founder is very talented, but because of what is happening, their business is more like offline. So we have to ask the founder to really consider whether raising the next round will be something practical for him or for the team, or we might need to understand how to do the risk control or the cost control. And some of our portfolio, because they are growth stage, before that, some of them already develop of the synergy of integration, business cooperation. And because of what happening right now, we have to kind of advise them to kind of preparing for the worst. What maybe the worst could happen. So I already encourage them to think more aggressive. Some of them before that, because they've already brought their companies, I suggest them not just thinking about a kind of a business cooperation. Maybe this is a time that they need to consider about integration, because we need to make sure that every company, they need to have enough bullet, and then they can survive for a longer time to see what kind of challenge ahead of us. So right now we are working even more closely with our teams and ask our team to be full-time supporting them no matter what kind of a challenge they are facing at the moment. Yes.
Your Highness.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Thank you very much for having me. It's a really big honor to be here. I follow everything that the Federation does, and I really want to applaud all the efforts that you guys are doing in Saudi Arabia. In terms of what we're doing, especially now with the COVID issue, we've always been supportive to our portfolio companies, whether they were multi-billion-dollar companies or whether they are smaller early stage companies. From coaching some of the staff in terms of comms. So we usually lend our comms department to theirs, and then they can do as they wish in terms of getting all the information and getting all the expertise that we have in our companies, as well as going to different governments or different companies or different entities and opening up the doors for them and just opening up different possibilities for them to explore new markets. And my point of view, I think the Middle East market is a really interesting market for any venture capital company or any early stage company, simply because of the purchasing power there is here, as well as many different markets all around the MENA, North Africa, as well as you're roughly serving about 500 million people. So there's a big market here we're also including Africa, obviously, because Zipline, for example, we've opened up a lot of countries for them in Africa. So we really coach them in terms of learning the value of having a really long runway right now, and really squeezing every dollar every dime out of the dollar that you can get, or every cent that you can get from the dollar right now for special times like this. And luckily enough, we've had companies that our own employees at these different companies have offered themselves to have a pay cut through different mechanisms. But we've seen really a lot of solidarity happen throughout this hardship that we're going through. But I'm really optimistic to what the future is going to bring with our portfolio companies, and seeing how they can, if they can, or when they go through the issues that they're going through now, later issues won't be as big at all.
A lot of great points by my fellow panelists. I guess the thing to add is it's really important to draw the backdrop, at least when we look at the VC and technology ecosystem and the lens of that with respect to what's going on in the region. So you have a region that is basically possessing tremendous potential when it comes to its purchase power, its connectivity, its youth percentage, and how much they're driving in terms of digital demand and value creation. So you have a lot of great fundamentals in the Middle East, and particularly in Saudi Arabia. that are conducive to a thriving tech venture ecosystem. Now, the COVID happened, and what is interesting is it's surfacing a ton of challenges, and every sector is dealing with it and responding to it and trying to alleviate the impact of it. But what it's also creating is this acceleration effect for a lot of things that were gradually happening, especially in the digital sphere, that are gradually becoming norms and actually very much accelerating in terms of being adopted, being referenced as new norms and new models to do business, to interact, to engage. So I guess there are pros and cons, and our portfolio companies are dealing with the same, dichotomy of pros and cons, because you have some that are winning and leveraging these new norms and disruptions to serve people in new ways and serve them better, and some are dealing with the challenges of it as well. Though also a common denominator across both schools is that everyone is dealing with, pressures on cash flows, collection, drop in demand in some areas, though you have spiking demand in many other areas. So it's uneven, and the high level dynamic that is going on is your list of known unknowns keeps increasing by the day, and you have to very carefully know what was a known and suddenly became a known unknown, and factor to that in your operations and how you budget and allocate resources, and be super ready for the unknown unknowns to basically impact you in ways that are unforeseen. So this is what's going on at a high level, I guess. Though generally, it's amazing how much new norms are developing, and how the portfolio companies are stepping up to create new ways of engaging, new ways of consuming, new ways of learning, etc., etc.
Nice. This actually takes me to the now, and maybe we can actually start like the other way around, like with you, Abdurrahman, again, on the risk appetite. So you've just been mentioning that you've been seeing some are doing good, some are doing bad. Has this actually changed your risk appetite? Because everything that we've been talking about was actually about existing portfolio, but what about new deals? So are you looking at it differently, or have your risk appetite changed towards these deals?
It's a great question. I guess our thesis has not changed. So our thesis was very much about that this region has probably one of the world's highest dichotomy levels between digital supply on one hand and digital demand on the other. And Saudi Arabia in particular punches above its weight across every single imaginable category when it comes to things like video streaming, e-gaming, e-commerce, e-learning. So when we look at this, that was our thesis. We wanted to go and create the engines that can aggregate that demand or potentially aggregate the supply and essentially become winning champions that are serving local needs, and hopefully as a byproduct of that generate significant value. So what is going on today is actually only accelerating and validating that thesis. Because look everywhere with a COVID lens, any kind of response or alleviation or intervention measure that is being considered or being implemented as part of the strategy to deal with COVID has some technological element or some technology player, and in fact has maybe a lot more venture startups than large incumbent players who are able to adapt much faster and pivot and be a lot more nimble and agile when it comes to dealing with the challenges that are coming up in extremely accelerating pace. So the thesis has not changed. In fact, we're extremely bullish on how these ventures are now stepping up and are able to cope much better and develop propositions that are serving people and becoming super integral to their daily lives.
Your Royal Highness. Have you?
Yes,
Please
tell me the question one more time.
Yeah. So have you? I mean, have your risk appetite changed towards new deals? We know what you've been doing with the existing portfolio, but want to know more about the new deals that you're looking at.
Interesting. So our risk appetite has always been the same, and I don't think it has changed now. We're definitely waiting on the sideline a little more just to see any good deals emerge. But I'm never one to be that investor that swoops in the last second because a company really needs a cash infusion and we're going to muscle them for a better valuation. At the end of the day, we're partners with our portfolio companies, and we want them to feel that we are not taking advantage of them and anything. So our risk appetite really hasn't changed. As a matter of fact, we're actually investing a little. In the last 2 months, we've actually made about 3 investments, and we're probably going to make another investment in the next month or so. Our risk appetite is really looking at great deals with good valuations and good numbers, and making sure that these companies have got reasonable market growth and market potential behind them. But no, honestly, I'm not into the public market. I mean, by default, I am because we're in Beyond Meat prior to its IPO. But other than that, Square. But other than that, Square before it was IPO. But we're not in the public market, and I'm not really a big fan of the public market, to be honest. It's as you've seen the last month or month and a half, nothing makes sense in the public market. You can argue that nothing makes sense in the private market when we're looking at WeWork and others, but we're not talking about that, and we're not in that, so it doesn't matter really. But our main focus is in the private markets, and I see a lot of really good potential in them. In terms of sector, again, we're sector agnostic. We have an amazing portfolio that derives from our fund, which is the Proof Fund, which is a pro rata opportunity fund. As a matter of fact, 500 Startups is one of our partners, and we have other partner funds that we invest together in. So again, we're not really looking at this situation as a opportunistic time. We're not looking to increase or decrease our investments. We're just going with the flow and seeing any good companies that have really good returns and really good potential, so to speak, and then we'll execute from there.
Jessica?
Yes, I think that we don't change anything, but will be making our decisions more cautious based on I think the challenge is for everyone, not just for the startup, for VCs as well. Because if portfolios is not facing challenge, they are not be able to kind of bring a better performance. That kind of record will impact us as well. So whatever right now from new investment, actually will be more kind of aggressive, looking into the market to see what kind of a new team can bring new solution to kind of support the society to functioning better, and what kind of talents will be more have a more courage to kind of seizing this opportunity and to try something different, something new. So we are very happy to share that actually we are moving even faster. We are speed up and kind of conducting our deals. And then all the potential target for us, potential company for us, they can have a kind of a support even earlier in place, and then they can run faster to fight against of time.
Okay. What about you, Jessica? Oh, sorry, Courtney.
Sure. No, I think I echo a lot of the sentiments that have been shared here. If you look across 500's portfolio over the next year, we'll write about 300 more checks into companies. We are sector agnostic, but we were just actually having a discussion yesterday as we prepare for our upcoming batch in San Francisco. And when we talked about the things that we were looking for, I think one of the realities of what we're facing now is that if you're in a sector that has been hard hit, retail, just as an easy example, I think getting an investment into that space at this point has become more challenging, and I think it's important for founders to recognize that. And so whereas normally metrics for first-time founders and for new startups are getting harder and harder to raise investment, but at the same time, I think we're really encouraging people coming out of our programs and the founders that are pitching us, be really sure that this is the time you want to raise money. I think people are going to be looking with a really critical eye at your metrics, especially if you're in one of the hard-hit sectors. Now, keeping that in mind, I think we are really leaning into our existing portfolios as well, and looking at who we need to shore up to make sure they make it through this time period, and even more so, can exceed their expectations even in this time period, because they're making some big bets if they're in an industry that is perhaps buoyed by what's going on with COVID.
Earlier, I was just actually with a very short chat with Courtney. We were talking about the need that the founders have now for more of emotional support rather than technical support. So with that in mind, I'll probably shift it a little bit, because there is also an emotional status and sentiment that has been changing with the investors. And normally, like as VCs, everybody thinks that we are greedy and all we look for is just return on capital, which is true. But yet we also, I think it's due to the VC's activity, which have changed the world. Maybe we'll start with Your Royal Highness. You've been doing a lot of, I don't know, do you call it? I heard you saying that it's not impact investing, it's actually investing in companies which have an impact. So maybe we can start with you here.
Sure. What is the question?
So you've been doing a lot of investment that has an impact.
Yeah.
So shedding some light, because everybody thinks that all the investments are just made looking for simply a capital return, but
Sure.
there has been an impact.
Look, the beauty of what of the state that we're at right now in the century, I guess, is a lot of companies are being built with a conscious philosophy also. So no, they're not just looking at milking the last dollar just to get a return for their investors. There is a social aspect to and a conscious aspect to returning some good back to society, back to the earth, back to whatever has a positive return, not necessarily a monetary return to you. So again, we say our investments are agnostic, but then again, I'm not going to invest in firearms and alcohol and tobacco and gambling and any companies that exploit earth or animals or humans for that matter. But whatever the heck it is, there are certain things that I'm just not going to touch. And by default, you invest in companies that do good in the world. Now, granted, we invested in, for example, a company like Casper. The best return you can get from that is a better night's sleep. I mean, that's the from my understanding, that's all that's happening with that company for now, at least.
But a lot of nowadays, I guess.
Oh, yeah, but again, our philosophy is definitely not to invest in companies that aren't in our idea of doing good in this world. But again, we're not going to invest in a company because it's just doing good. It has to have a return. It has to have good numbers. It has to have a really good management team. They have to have a good marketing department. They have to know what the heck the market requires for them to be successful. They have to know about their competition. There's a lot of hurdles that founders go through when we invest in these companies, simply because we want to be partners with them. We want to give them something that's really precious to us, which is our money. But at the end of the day, they have to do well with it. And one aspect is give me a good return on that. But two, you have to do good consciously.
Nice. We'll probably go to Abdurrahman.
I agree. I think you can do good and do well at the same time, and still be a commercial business that is generating value. So for us, it always starts with what is the problem being solved? Is it a real problem? Is it big enough, and does it serve a large scale of users, and has a path to monetization that is clear? And if you start looking at these investments with such a framework, and you always go back to first fundamentals: what's the problem? How big? Is the team capable? I think you're going to naturally generate a ton of value. And just to give you an example, I mean, all of our portfolio companies have some kernel of truth when it comes to the problem being something that is going to enhance people's lives, or make an industry behave better, or digitize an industry that is broken. And a lot of that is going to generate a tremendous spillover effect in terms of impact and value and whatnot. And to name a few, even though all of them have some angles for each of these variables, Ni'na', for example, we invested in the eye of the COVID storm, right in the middle of it. The guys are tremendous, great team of founders. It's been on our radar for actually a year plus, but they were able to increase their capacity to serve, online grocery commerce, all the way from picking to delivering to people's homes in less than 10 days by 3x. Right, this is tremendous for a portfolio company to step up and triple their size in that kind of time frame. Just shows you, what they're capable of doing. Noon Academy, e-learning, they're redefining the way students engage and learn. They were able to add 1 million new users since COVID started. Mersul, day and night, trying to get the couriers across the country to serve people. Trucker, moving goods and trying to solve cross-border issues for even the drivers themselves of trucks. Visita, the largest health tech app in MENA, launched telemedicine within a week. They got their product engineering team to do multiple sprints and offered it for free to diagnose COVID symptoms. So I totally agree with the sentiment. If you attack a problem that is big enough and that people need, value will be created.
Great. Jessica, I know that you have to leave, so maybe we'll have this part with you, answering the same question. Actually, just more understanding more about the impact that some of your investments have made.
Yes. I just like I mentioned at the very beginning, because some of our portfolios are in the emerging markets such as India and Southeast Asia, and I think that the crisis hit those places earlier than MENA region. So we've already have a lot of a conversation with them, and because of some of them are very earlier stage, so they are taking facing a lot of challenges. So we were encouraged to consider to prepare for the worst, but kind of if they are certain that there is the right strategy, and then they need to be more aggressive to fight against the time. That's so far what we are share with them. And I think that if the startups, because I know that in the MENA, even in South Asia and Southeast Asia, actually many, just like Connie said, that many of these entrepreneurs, they are first time, and some of them actually they are facing a lot of difficulty that never happened to them before, and they have no one to talk to. So I think that it is a time that us, like the investor, we plays a bigger role to support them, to walk them through all these kind of a crisis. And one of the things we can always remind them was this crisis might last for another 12 or even longer time. And we need to kind of think out of the box. What can be the right strategy? Yes.
Well,
thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Hope to talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Courtney?
Yeah, so I think maybe I'll talk about a slightly different angle to the question, which I think was originally how we speak to VCs being coined as greedy. So, I think 500's approach has always been slightly nuanced, I think, from simply being a financial investor. We believe in that entrepreneurship is inherently good for economies and good for people. And as a result of that, not only are we making capital investments into startups around the world, but we're also really doubling down on working with forward-thinking governments and corporations who are also a big part of the entrepreneurial economy and life cycle for a startup. So during this time, we're really taking it upon ourselves to continue with those partnerships and try and train up new emerging fund managers who create good deals and good relationships to support startups around the world, and also help governments to put programs in place that bring people into entrepreneurship, and use this time period as a way to draw people more into entrepreneurship as an opportunity.
Thanks. Again, maybe the most interesting part was seeing that the KBW looked into a lot of the cell-based and plant-based food early on. I would say when everybody was thinking that this is more of a myth rather than a real thing. And this maybe was driven by the passion that Your Highness had. Can you elaborate more? Like, why did you think that this is important, aside from even just the passion? I mean, if you're looking at it and you're expecting a return, so this has actually to matter for a large number of people, not only yourself. What was the different thing that you've seen at that point in time?
Well, to start, honestly, I always wanted to understand more about the plant-based the plant-based proteins and the cellular agriculture industry, because it was just fascinating for me. From the time I heard about it, and then I was studying about it until I had the pleasure of meeting Uma from Memphis Meats I'm forgetting his name right now, but talking to Beyond Meat's founder, to me it was really, really interesting. So that I really have to talk to them more and just understand where are they in the process. And frankly, what I found out, at least from Uma's side on Memphis Meats, I saw that they were really, really early. But then they were solving a real issue, and the real issue is we cannot sustain feeding 7-8 billion people the way we're doing right now, and we're not going to be able to feed 12 billion people by 2050 maybe. I'm not sure what the accurate number is, but regardless of that, let's just say 10 billion people. We're not going to be able to sustainably feed so many people the amount of meat protein that they need through conventional measures. It's harming the environment. It's devastating the ocean life. It's devastating the ecosystems. It's creating a huge biodiversity. It's killing biodiversity. And there's a lot of negative aspects to it that frankly, cellular agriculture solves. So that was one of the reasons why I thought that was a no-brainer. I mean, they're doing something that really is, and the inefficiencies. Sorry, but the more important, the inefficiencies that go with animal agriculture. I mean, besides the horrific conditions they're in, whether it's wet markets from what we've seen in China and everywhere else in the world, by the way, because wet markets are everywhere, but COVID just happened to be out of China. But the next one is going to be around the corner, you know, and these issues have got to be solved. And the only way to solve them is to source protein in a different manner. And let's put the compassionate hat aside and put the business hat on. The inefficiencies that come with animal agriculture are enormous. I mean, you get for every 1 calorie of meat, you have to put in 9 calories of food to feed the chickens, a chicken, for example. So that was, and that, by the way, the chicken is the most popular, besides fish, obviously, but chicken is the most popular meat out there. So the inefficiencies are vast. Besides the huge amount of antibiotics that are being fed to these animals, 80% of the antibiotics sold in the United States are sold to farmers. Stop for a second and think about it, just for a minute. It makes no sense. Doctors have been pleading the FDA and pleading the U.S. government to regulate this, because it's only a matter of time before you have another swine flu outbreak that you had in 1918. And it's going to happen again. We've had Zika, we've had MERS from here, we've had
Probably
COVID.
want to watch out. You probably want to watch out so nobody just starts hitting it, just like Gates, and everybody's just like, "Whoa, this guy basically started talking about it like 2 or 3 years before."
No, I mean, look, Gates invested in it, and granted, you know, he's definitely a visionary. So we've all made that investment. And I did come to the Middle East about 3 years ago, and I pitched this investment to many investors. I got a lot of people rolling their eyes at me, which is fine. But now, at least, I'm hoping that they see the importance of this. This is not a compassion play. This is a serious investment with amazing returns. We're talking about an industry that's a $2 trillion industry by 2050, the meat industry. It's more than a $2 trillion industry, and the plant-based protein has only scratched the surface of that market. So it's a market that people need to come into and come into it heavily to reap the returns for the earth, as well as for the animals, as well as for our health.
Rahman, being basically STV, the largest venture capital firm in the Middle East, obviously on path and for a pretty much impressive record. Have you guys been considering anything as cell-based or plant-based? I mean, the food tech in general, ag tech, I would say, as a sector.
No, our primary focus is on digital software-driven businesses, particularly ones where the synergies with our main investor, LP, STC, is synergistic. So this mostly means consumer tech and B2B SaaS technologies. And even when you look at these two, which are predominantly capture most of where the VC checks are going these days, if you look at a cross section of the industry, MENA just has a tremendous amount of room and upside to generate there. So we're very excited about doubling down on that focus, backing champions or soon to be digital champions who are going to be able to capture as much of these white spaces in MENA as possible. And also, you know, one thing that the COVID situation is kind of making us think about, and our portfolio companies about as well, is this is not only a chance to use software and digital technologies to solve current problems or deal with current challenges, but this is also a great time to look at leapfrog opportunities. You know, a lot of the things that you know are there is this very interesting saying that says the future is here but unevenly distributed. I think what COVID is making us realize is there is an accelerating effect in which we can get the future a lot closer to us than we think if we capitalize these companies who are thinking big in a great way and offer them a lot of support and help them grow their capabilities to be able to step up and create these leapfrog opportunities. So I'm myself and the team and a lot of the CEOs of the portfolio companies are really excited about this thinking big shift in mindset and leveraging the circumstances today to enable some leapfrog use cases and applications. And I think the more we can come together collectively as an industry of investors and operators and even strategic corporates across the region and decision makers to think of, in parallel to us trying to solve and alleviate and deal with the challenges of today of dealing with COVID and flattening the curve, we need to leave some mindset and some room for this long-term moonshot leapfrog thinking. And I think the venture community and the venture startups are extremely well positioned to be able to take on that path.
Courtney, I think you're the most of us who looks more into the global aspect when it comes to the startup ecosystem. I mean, you're what, in almost 70 countries or so?
Yes. We're investing in 76 countries, I think, right now.
All right. So what are like the 3 top trends that you see? And I'm talking about, it might be like one in different continent or a different geography, but if it differs by geography, we'd love to know that.
Sure. Well, actually, I think one of the big trends that we are seeing relates to, more of the impact-driven trend that we were just discussing. Earlier this year, we ran our first accelerator with the UNDP out of Jakarta, where we were working with companies who were focused on one of the sustainable development goals. And that, I think, is a growing trend across multiple ecosystems where you're seeing, you're seeing governments and you're also seeing founders who are very passionate about contributing to, the advancement of SDGs. So I do think that is a growing trend and something that we're certainly taking a really hard look at right now in terms of our future strategy there. I think the second big trend is just I think the fintech explosion is just going to continue, and certainly in light of what COVID has brought. We look at our investments in Denari Cash as an example, tremendous growth during this time period, and we're seeing that growth across the fintech growth across all of the economies. I think it's become such a critical infrastructure layer in both frontier and emerging economies. And it's really a basis for people to be able to build off of once you have a strong fintech infrastructure. So I think that will continue to be important. I think the third thing that we're seeing that I'm particularly excited about is EdTech. And this was even before coming into COVID. EdTech, I think there's a revolution going on in terms of how people are able to access learning, both at an individual level, for example, like Udacity, Udemy, et cetera, but then also I think with our governments and corporations figuring out a way to train individuals, or to train the masses rather, in a way that is cost efficient. And also, able to do so quickly. So I'm really excited to see the changes that's coming with EdTech and really what COVID is going to do to accelerate that. And certainly here in the U.S., hopefully make it more affordable, for everybody to access.
Well, I mean, probably prior to the last question I have is 2 things that you guys, if you are to send 2 short messages, one to the founders and one to either LPs, decision makers, what would those be? You guys feel free to chip in.
I can add a bit, just in terms of thinking about founders. I'm spending time right now hearing from founders who, as you referenced earlier, what they're struggling with right now is not necessarily technical in nature, right? It's not how to fundraise, it's not how to run the P&L, it's not how to, market, et cetera. It's the psychological stress of experiencing an economic downturn, having to ruthlessly prioritize and then make decisions across your operations. And that it's a very stressful time for founders. So, what I would encourage founders to do is to be open about the stress that they're experiencing, to connect with other founders and their investors during this time, and make sure that they are, thinking of their mental health as well during this time period. I think that's very important. And then finally, something I tell myself and also tell our portfolio is like, you don't need easy, you just need possible. And it's certainly not easy right now, but it is possible to survive through this and to continue to thrive and really dig deep and even, do more than what you think you can. So just keeping in mind that we will get through this.
Abdurrahman?
I echo what Courtney said very much. I think founders are going through a really hard time, but also a very interesting time where they are dealing with a lot of complexity, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of volatility. At the same time, they need to figure out ways to quickly deal with changing dynamics, reprioritize efforts, relook at budgets, be lean, but yet, move the needle on big things with focus. So I guess it's a good time to take a step back and take on efficiency and focus as key guiding principles in everything you do. Maintain leanness and agility, and ruthlessly cut out any noise and any extra fat, and try to make the organization as lean as possible and as focused as possible, and go for efficiency wherever you can. For other players in the ecosystem, decision makers, investors, etc., I think this reimagination exercise of what's possible in a world that is tremendously more connected, tremendously more digitized, where use cases are ripe for disruption, where you have an unmatched ability today and a window of opportunity to create new ways of doing things through digital technologies, should be the name of the game. And it does not only solve efficiency issues, but also allows you to go and do really big long-term investments that are probably going to save you a tremendous amount of resources and money, and create a ton of value down the line. So this is a time to build new things and take a very long-term arc on the timeline of when these things are going to come to fruition.
Nice. Your Highness?
It's really hard to add anything more than what Courtney and Abdurrahman said, to be honest. I mean, I totally agree with them in every point that they said. In terms of entrepreneurs, if you're not learning now, then you're never going to learn. This is the time to learn how to adapt, how to be efficient, how to learn how to handle money, how to learn how to communicate with your staff or with your partners. Now is the time to really open up their hearts and really understand and try to understand what their staff are going through, and see how they can adapt to accommodate their staff's needs. At the end of the day, staff are as good as partners at the end of the day in early stage companies. I totally echo what Abdurrahman said in terms of these uncertain times. You have to learn from them, and you have to learn how to be efficient from these times, because these are really, really unique times. Hopefully it will not happen again, but this is a really, really unique time to understand how we're all interconnected with one another. The whole world is getting affected by a virus that you can't see. It's insane. So leaders and venture capitalists, VC firms, and everything have to learn also how to deal with stressful times like this, not necessarily the leaders of these huge VC companies, but definitely go down to the smallest member of their staff, and really be accommodating to these to everyone and to them, and see what their needs are, and really show that this is a family and a collective society that brings up this VC firm or this company, as opposed to just everyone's. People are, you let people off and stuff like that. So it's really important to show people their value, to be honest.
Well, thank you for your time. And with this, I mean, I would love for, I mean, this is very much exciting, and probably I would love for that to go for another hour. But I'm sure that everybody has something to do, and and I would love to thank the guys at the Saudi Arabian Federation for Cybersecurity Programming and Drones, Yasser and his team, everybody who made this possible, the participants, and for your time. I would probably just end up with a very simple line. Ray Dalio just lately said that this is just a new future. This is a new market. And earlier this morning, I mean, there was a session from the Public Investment Fund, and they've mentioned, like, I mean, it's technology coming to rescue. And I guess we all have a role in that. I wish you all the best. Thank you again for having me and having my participants here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was an absolute pleasure sharing a panel with people like yourselves. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Abdurrahman.
Pleasure is all ours.
Thank you very much.
Time. And as you said, Mr. Nabil, technology will come to risk, and that's why we and a lot of organizations around the world are encouraging youngsters to engage in competitions like this homathon that we're undergoing now. 10,000 plus developers are trying to come up with solutions to minimize the effect of this COVID-19 that came out of the sudden. Nobody was ready for this, but we're sure that our young generation are going to come up with some amazing results that maybe end up in your VCs very soon as well. مشاهدينا الكرام، شكرا لانضمامكم اليوم في البث اليوم الخامس من فعاليات هوماثون. إلى أن نلقاكم غدا بإذن الله في أول أيام رمضان المبارك. كل عام وأنتم بخير، في أمان الله. Thank you.
مع السلامة.